Yeah, so talk is actually going to be pretty simple. I've been in the data science, machine learning space for about 4 to 5 years, and I saw a lot of products fail. And this is kind of a story of what to do and what not to do when you're trying to build one of those products. Um, and yeah, it's things I've seen, things I've also went through. So I'm just sharing that with you guys tonight. That did not work. How do I? That worked. Okay, yeah. We often hear the statement like data is the new oil, but a lot of people don't actually know what to do with it. They don't know what that means, how to actually get something out of data. And so you need to start asking the right questions when you're thinking of building a data product. And I've just put some questions that I like to ask when I hear that someone wants to start a new product, because these are often the questions that are not asked and end up costing you a lot. And I have some stories to share on each of those questions. So I'm going to start with the first one. Yeah, so do your investors actually understand your product? That's something that doesn't sound like, why would you think of this? Because your investors, if they give you the money and they know what they're doing with it or why they want it, then that's basically all you need to know. But actually, the difference with a data product is that they're buying into what you're doing, but then they're going to use it for probably the rest of their company that needs to interact with it. And that's sometimes questions that they don't even bother asking because they don't think it's relevant. They think they're asking you to build something, and then they'll figure out how to deal with it later, which is often not the case. And so they often imagine this thing that learns, or something that can become better on its own as time goes, because you're going to get more and more data. But some machine learning models that I've seen in practice are not more complicated than the graph that you see on the screen. Yeah, you have a data plot, and you basically just trace a line through it, and it actually works better than all the complicated models you can think of, just because that's what works, and there's nothing more to say about it. The best example I knew about this is actually the first job that I had in the field. I joined the startup incubator, and their mentality was, we're going to pay you a full-time salary and as an employee, and you're going to experiment and try to build something that's relevant for the companies owned by for the companies that also, there's some other company that owns the incubator and other companies, and they wanted to provide value for these companies that they own. And so one of these companies came to the incubator and asked, we want a chatbot to reduce churn when phone calls arrive at the customer service center. And they just want to automatically filter those out, save some time, save the customers some time, and that kind of stuff. And so we did a POC. They were satisfied with the results, but didn't go with it in production. And then we did another POC, and the same thing happened. And then a third one, and the same thing happened. And then at the end, they were really happy with our work, and they proposed a deal to actually start going to production with something. And the 3 solutions that they asked for had no machine learning involved at all. Yet their actual statement as to why they want this was, we want to know what we can do in the machine learning space. And so you can imagine the disappointment when I'm being told, they want to know what I can do in machine learning, but their actual desire is to see a button-based chatbot that just requires, let's say, a message and a bunch of buttons you have to click. And then when you click the button, it's already pre-programmed that this is the next message. No machine learning at all. And yet they're going to brag about this. They're going to market it. And so you're just sitting there thinking, maybe I spent my time with the wrong investor, So that's something to think about. And I guess the best way to figure out if they understand it is to ask questions yourself. So you can ask back questions such as, what kind of data do you want to put into this? Let's say the product is defined already. Now you just want to know if they understand. So what kind of data do you want to put in? What do you expect that the chatbot is actually learning? Yeah, or the product that you're building, if it's a machine learning model for search or for predictions, what is it predicting? Who is going to check the data quality over time? Yeah, let's say you're doing a search engine and it's for fashion. Well, maybe it works in the summer, and then 6 months later, well, if it works for summer clothes, You don't want to recommend summer clothes in the winter because that doesn't make a lot of sense. So who's going to make sure that these things happen? And if you realize that maybe it makes sense in their head as a business concept, but they don't have the capacity to actually deal with something like that, then maybe you do six months of work, and then afterwards, when it comes to time to go to production, there's nothing to do with it, so the project basically dies. And this happens a lot. All right.
Just one question.
Yes.
Can you define investors? So do you mean more like stakeholders or like VCs or something like that?
People that contribute to the project without putting their time in.
But they will be
so they could be putting money or giving you resources, employees.
Sure, but they will be the users of the product or
not? No, not the users. Yeah, I mean, like, for instance, if a company wants to hire you to build a model, then I'm thinking like the CEO or something like that. But if you are the one building your own machine learning product, then we could be talking about actual investors, right? But it's perfectly fine to think of this also as the client if you're building something for them. Yeah, the whole idea is just you're building this thing for someone. Does that someone know what to do with it once you're done building it? Yeah. So it's a bit weird that I show this slide without actually starting to talk. But yeah, this is a situation I've encountered actually very often. You talk with people that are interested into building a solution, and you come up with a great plan. Technology is amazing. The model works. The data is great. You can make nice predictions. And then it goes into production, and you're not there anymore. Yeah. Maybe they hired you for a short time period, and now they just work with what they have, and they have to maintain it in a certain way. And it's not data scientists or machine learning engineers that maintain this, but people that generate the data and then put it in their database through probably a web portal or something like that. And then this data has to be managed. And you have a machine learning model that trains on that data. So the model has to be managed as well. And the question is, how are they going to actually handle that? Yeah. Just 1 second. Yeah. So the biggest issue with why it's hard to manage these products is because we're used to thinking of software as rule-based algorithms. So basically, if I'm a person and I ask an engineer, I need something that does this, then they expect, okay, there's going to be rules that are going to generate my output, and that's how it's going to work. But a machine learning engineer does statistical predictions. So it's an algorithm that generates guesses, so to speak. And so you always have to deal with the part where the guess is wrong. And that can dramatically change how you work with the model depending on the industry, the kind of users you have, the kind of customers you have, because sometimes they're not the same. And I'm going to give you 2 examples. So one example where they manage the guessing part really great is N26 chatbot. I don't know if you've ever used it or if you're an N26 user at all, but basically when they got it out, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, their idea was very simple. You can talk to the bot by default. So when you have a question and you click on the chatbot window, you start talking to the bot immediately. And it says to you up front, anytime you're not happy with talking to the bot, you can just type human, and then you start talking to a human. So that basically leaves all the room to play for the chatbot to fail, make mistakes, collect some data about why it failed, how did it fail, how the user was not happy with the conversation. And so even if at the beginning the chatbot had 1% problem resolution rate, it's still 1%. And every other user would just have typed human and gotten to a human, and that's what happened before. So basically that gave them the room to play to help their users and train their chatbot at the same time. And even if they never got to perfection, which I assume they don't, I mean, like at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if their success rate with the chatbot doing 100% of the conversation would be somewhere around 30 to 50%. You know, that's still an insane gain over 0% without a chatbot, right? Even if they never reach that perfect rate, being imperfect is okay, because they have to live with the fact that anyway, the algorithm they're using is not meant to be perfect, it's meant to be guessing. And it still cuts them an insane amount of costs, saves the users an insane amount of time, and it just works, yeah? Whereas there's the other kind of approach that tends to fail very often, which is that your goal is to minimize the error in the guessing as much as possible. So basically, you want your guesses to be perfect every time, yeah? And then you don't know what to do in the case where there's an error. So these are usually the kinds of products that induce like a very poor user experience, because let's pretend you have like 99.5% accuracy, right? So anytime a user would use your model, 1 time out of 200, they wouldn't work. If you have 10,000 users, that's a lot of unhappy people, right? And only the unhappy people are gonna complain, leave bad reviews, tell that your product doesn't work, and it basically kills your product up front, even though the margin for error is super small. Yeah, okay, one last thing I want to check. Okay, no. So, do you have the resources? That's another question that we don't ask very often when trying to build these kinds of products, because it's not just about having a team, having the money, having the data. It's also about having it work for your company. So let's say, for instance, you want to build a search engine. Okay, so you want to build a search engine, and so you get a data scientist on board. You get some people in your company that are going to generate and label the data, or maybe crawl it on the internet. And then you get your model trained, your model goes into production. And then the issue is like the people that will maintain the model afterwards, they're not there. Or maybe they're busy working on other things, or you don't have the time to hire them, or all these kinds of problems that can show up. If these things are not in the plan, by the time you've reached a certain stage in your machine learning development, some things are going to break, and then the project is going to die. I've actually experienced this myself. So when I was working in a company, the founders themselves of the company were working on labeling the data. So finding the data, labeling it, and then they hired a consultant to build the model, and then they had the model working. And then one of the things that they didn't have is a way to put their search engine behind their website. So their website had so many problems that when trying to integrate the model that they had behind their website, they didn't have the resources for back-end development just to make the connection between the two. So it sounds weird, because why would you invest so much money into something you cannot integrate? But if you have no one asking the question, that's what happens, yeah? So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I had to say. But I mean, of course, I went through a bunch of other amazing stories that I'd love to tell you. So if you have any questions or you're curious about anything, just shoot your questions. Thank you.